situation in some spots, but we're really waiting to see what happens with the NFC East, the bottom of the NFC playoff picture. We know the deal at the top of the AFC, but there's plenty to sort out here in Week 17. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. All right, Trev, let's get right to it. The Jets with that stunning win over the Browns. It stands to reason that the guy that might be the NFL Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski, is outdueled by a coach that probably is going to be fired within hours of the team ending their regular season on Sunday. That's a topsy-turvy NFL for you in 2020. I want to run down the scenario here for the Browns. Believe it or not, they can still get into the playoffs, although their playoff chances have now shrunk to less than 50%. If they can win against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday, they can get in. They can also get in possibly here if they want to by virtue of a loss from the Indianapolis Colts, though they got the Jacksonville Jaguars. I wouldn't certainly bet on that. But here's the situation for the Browns that people didn't realize over the weekend what they were going into. People look at it and say, Baker Mayfield, Trev, threw 53 times. What in the world was he doing throwing that many times against the Jets? Keep in mind, the Browns didn't have their top 4 wide receivers, all out due to COVID. And I don't even say that in a passing way. It's 2020. Even the most crazy of things is said in such a staid tone that nothing seems surprising anymore. But just let that settle in. They didn't have their top 4 wide receivers, so Baker didn't have anybody to essentially throw to. Baker also didn't have his left tackle. Baker also didn't have his starting right guard. His top 2 wide receivers, one of them, his top 2 wide receivers, came from the practice squad. Their flight to Newark, New Jersey to play the Jets was delayed 4 hours, and then they had contact tracing on the ground. On Sunday morning, without their top 4 wide receivers, Kevin Stefanski gathered the wide receivers he did have, and they ran routes and went through things in a parking garage to make sure they could all get on the same page. No excuses. All of it happened. They lose. The Jets clinch the 2 spot. The Jags have the 1 spot in the draft. We'll talk about that in a second. But now, after all this adversity, the Browns need to win against the Steelers to get in. They could get a little help to get in, but this was a disastrous performance any way you look at it Sunday, no matter how depleted they were.
So what do you think about them with the receivers out, throwing the ball 53 times anyway? What do you think, Zubin?
It just didn't seem like a recipe for success, considering I think they have one of the best running games in the NFL.
Yep. Now, most people agree with you. I see it differently.
Okay, go ahead.
Right? I don't mind them throwing the ball 53 times. I thought it was the right decision. Here's why. Guess who also knew that they were struggling at receiver? The Jets defense. And they were crowded up at the line to gum up the short passes and to gum up the running game especially. And the running game went nowhere. And when you're a play caller, the first thing you need to do is not commit to the run. The first thing you need to do is string together some first downs. And if your running game is getting utterly stuffed, then you've got to go to plan B. I mean, Nick Chubb averaged just about 2.5 yards a carry. So did Kareem Hunt. They were going nowhere. So what do? You take what the defense gives you. And did the passing game go well? Actually, it wasn't all that terrible. They were able to move the ball through the air, and they were in position to win. The reason they lost this game was not because they threw the ball 53 times. The reason the Browns lost this game was 3 fumbles by Baker Mayfield. One of them was at the 30-yard line, and 4 plays later, their own 30. 4 plays later, Sam Darnold throws an 11-yard touchdown pass. Okay. And then he fumbles the ball on the 17-yard line, and the Jets punch it in from there. That's 10 points, or excuse me, they don't punch it in. They kick a field goal from there. The defense held. So that's a field goal and a touchdown off of Baker Mayfield fumbles deep in his own territory. 10 points in a game that the Browns lost by 7. So it wasn't that they threw the ball so much. The problem was turning it over. And we would have talked about had he not turned those over or had the defense been able to hold on that touchdown. We'd be talking more about how the game plan did a good job of adjusting to what the Jets defense was doing by throwing the ball, even though that was counterintuitive. Instead, because of those fumbles and what happened on those fumbles, we're blaming the offensive coordinator for a terrible game plan. I don't think that's fair.
Let's sum it up one more time before we hear from Baker Mayfield. For the Browns, their playoff hopes have plummeted to under 50%. Would have been a very high percentage to make it had they been able to win against the Jets. But instead, they now need a win against the Steelers. The good thing for the Browns is that the Steelers have clinched the division. So it's just a matter of what they want to do. Does Tomlin want to rest players? It should be an interesting scenario to see what he wants to do. You want to rest your guys, but then again, you've lost 3 of 4 games. You want to keep the momentum going in, especially after yesterday's rally against the Colts. We'll get into that in just a second. So Cleveland with the win over their arch rival Pittsburgh, who really has nothing to play for with regards to the division. It's sewn up. Again, they could also back their way into the playoffs with a loss if the Colts were to lose on Sunday, but the Colts are playing the Jags, who haven't won since week 1. So win and take care of business. Don't depend on Jacksonville.
And the Jags have something to play for, Trevor Lawrence. So they're looking the other direction. I'm not saying they're going to tank, just to say that there might be some influence there that they might not. It might be okay if they lose. Let's put it that way.
Indeed. So the Jags do have the first overall pick of the 2021 draft. The Jets have the second overall pick. We're going to get into that in just a second. Baker's not thinking about it. Of course, he was the number 1 overall pick in his draft. He's thinking playoffs. But after yesterday, he evaluated his play and what is ahead.
There's no excuse. Plain and simple, I failed this team. I put 3 balls on the ground. 2 of them that, they recovered, and then the other that on the 4th down obviously needed to just hold on to the damn ball. So plain and simple, I have to hold on to the damn ball. I failed this team. We had exactly what we needed to win this game, and I didn't do good enough. And that's it. There's nothing. I'm proud of these guys for being able to step up. I mean, these guys didn't even think they were going to play. So for anybody to criticize them, shame on you. Put it on me for not doing my job, for not playing at a high level like I should have, for not getting these guys going and finishing out this game. So got to hold on to the ball during a QB sneak.
Baker doing the right thing, putting him on himself. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. But again, let me just stick up for Baker. I know he is criticized all day long, but he didn't have his top 4 wide receivers, his left tackle, his right guard, and his starting 2 wide receivers yesterday. I'm guessing Jamarcus Bradley and Marvin Hall were never on your fantasy team, even though I know most fantasy seasons ended yesterday. That's not a fantasy scenario. Instead of throwing to Jarvis Landry and OBJ, you're throwing to Jamarcus Bradley and Marvin Hall, again, without his top 4 wide receivers and without 40% of his offensive line. I'm going to give them a pass. And despite that loss yesterday to the Jets, again, they can get in with the win over the Steelers, who don't have a ton to play for divisionally, considering they've clinched the AFC North as Mike Tomlin and company. Again, even if they were to lose to Pittsburgh by any scenario, they could get in with an Indy loss. But again, Indy playing the Jags. The Jags haven't won since week 1. They've got draft pick number 1. The Jets have draft pick number 2. And that's where we're headed next. Exactly what the Jets might do with pick number 2, especially since we know what the Jags are going to do with pick number 1. We'll get into it with the Jets after I have this from O'Reilly Auto here all morning long. So essentially, the Jets defeat the Browns, and with that win, they clinch the number 2 overall pick. It's only apropos because the 2021 NFL draft would be in Cleveland next April. So they defeat Cleveland. They lock up the 2 pick. Jacksonville's got the 1 pick. There's no discussion needed on what Jacksonville is going to do. Obviously, they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence and hope that he'll be slightly better than Blaine Gabbert and Blake Bortles, looking closer to Mark Brunell, a guy that could get you to the cusp of a Super Bowl. And that would be perfect, right? North Florida. Lawrence is from Lawrenceville, Georgia. Could be a perfect situation there if you put it all together and make it work. That seems like a franchise that's irrelevant, that's spinning its wheels, and the only thing that could make most people pay attention to the Jags would be getting Trevor Lawrence. Let's put him there. The Jets are in the 2 spot. Firm. They could go after Justin Fields. They could go after Zach Wilson, another BYU stalwart to match the man sitting 6 feet from me. They could go with Trey Lance. They could go with Mac Jones, Kyle Trask. It certainly doesn't seem like those 2 would be in top 2 territory, but they do need a quarterback, or maybe they don't need a quarterback. Or Trev, maybe they could spin that package of the number 2 pick and get a plethora of picks. So what should the Jets do? Some of the quarterbacks not named Trevor Lawrence, double down on Sam Darnold, and then build around him with somebody at the 2 pick, or package the 2 pick and get more picks.
I think they should stay with Sam Darnold. I think he has gotten a bad deal out of this whole thing because of the team around him. He at USC showed a lot of great instincts, but he didn't play all that much. I don't think that he ever really had mastered his own offense because he wasn't in it long enough. Now he comes to the NFL, to a Jets team that is truly abysmal. And he's expected to elevate that team, which really requires a quarterback with a lot of experience. Either that or a quarterback that can run around like crazy to avoid the pass rush and make plays off schedule. But if you want your quarterback to make plays on schedule within the offense, he needs to know the offense. He needs to know NFL defenses. And Sam Darnold did not come into the league advanced in that way. So the Jets have built up their offensive line. They've invested there, and so good for them, right? Their receiving core, however, is abysmal. It's terrible. It's just awful. And so who's he going to throw to? The running game is just okay. So he can't really rely on that either. And I don't know that drafting another quarterback with a number 2 spot would change anything. I would rather them take a guy like Penei Sewell, the left tackle out of Oregon, and then shift guys around on that offensive line to get the 5 best in there, depending on what position is best for them. I would put Sewell at left tackle for sure. But do that, make the team around him better, rather than bring in another quarterback and plug him into the same situation that Darnold has been in, and then hope that that guy can get up to speed fast enough that he can do something before you fire the next coach. So this is something that I think that Jets fans are amazing at the draft. I love them. Jets fans are knowledgeable and passionate. I love them. I played for the Jets. Absolutely love them. But this is a time when I think that the Jets would be better off building around Sam Darnold, keeping Sam Darnold, and making the team better than trying to bring in another quarterback that would elevate the team that's already there, because the team that's already there isn't going to win anyway, no matter who's playing quarterback.
Speaking of coach-quarterback combinations, we'll go to Chicago here in 4 minutes to talk about exactly what might happen with Matt Nagy and Mitch Trubisky. It didn't seem like too long ago that Trubisky wouldn't be back. Now there's reports the Bears would be interested in bringing him back and that Nagy could be back as well. We'll talk to our Bears reporter, Jeff Dickerson. That's coming up in 4 minutes to see what's going on with the head coach and quarterback situation in Chicago. You mentioned the situation with the Jets. It seems obviously a fait accompli at some point that Adam Gase is going to be out right after they complete their regular season on Sunday. Keyshawn has said this, and I always thought Keyshawn was looking at this from, in my opinion, maybe rose-colored glasses because of his affinity for Sam Darnold, sharing the same alma mater. He's the first person that said, and you echoed it, that Sam is a talented player. It's just very difficult to see it considering what's around him. A lot of people have been saying, Key, I think you're being a little too biased here. You're a little too in with Sam Darnold, a little too in with USC. But the last couple of games, particularly yesterday, have shown that Sam Darnold might have the goods. If Sam Darnold is surrounded by the requisite talent, I'm not talking like unbelievable talent like Patrick Mahomes or somebody else has with his otherworldly ability with Mahomes. If you get the requisite talent around Sam Darnold, what type of quarterback is he?
He's a quarterback whose instincts then could come to the fore because he's learning the offense. Although if they do make a change at coach, then he may have a whole new offense to learn, and that holds him back. But it's paralysis by analysis. A lot of ways we're seeing that with Tua in Miami in his rookie year. That Tua coming out of Alabama was an instinctual monster. Right now he's thinking so much, you're not seeing those instincts really let fly on the field. And Darnold was a similar kind of quarterback at USC. So as you give him new offenses to deal with and then receivers that aren't getting separation to go with more complex defensive looks that he has to understand, his instincts don't really get onto the field yet. And we won't know what Darnold's ceiling is until he has fully mastered an offense and he has guys around him that can run that offense well. Until then, remember, the kind of quarterback that you would need at the Jets is a grizzled veteran who can distribute the ball really fast and who can run like crazy. Not a whole lot of guys out there like that. And that's not where you're going to build your team anyway, because you're talking about bringing in a guy who can make up for problems elsewhere. You know what? Solve the problems elsewhere while your young quarterback continues to grow.
In our last couple minutes, we'll have Jeff Dickerson here in a minute. The Bears were left for dead, and so were the Jets. And I'm not saying the Raiders are great. We saw what happened to the Raiders. He had another skid to the finish after that loss to Miami on Saturday. They're going to miss the playoffs. But it stands to reason if it wasn't for that miracle throw from Carter Ruggs, they would have beaten the Raiders. They beat the Rams. They beat the Browns. Too little, too late for Adam Gase. Take me inside the mind, though, of an organization when you're playing as poorly as the Jets. You've won 2 in a row. You could have won 3 in a row. Everybody's saying you're sort of giving up. I've been somewhat impressed by the way the Jets have played here the last 3 weeks. It doesn't wash away the stench of the 0-13 start, but when a team is left for dead, much like the team they share a stadium with, when the Giants started 0-5 and 1-7, and they were on the cusp of the playoffs here until the last couple of weeks when they backslid with the Jones injury. Take me inside the mind of a player. You're 0-13. You've won 2 in a row. row. You could have won their last 3. They haven't given up. I don't think this reflects anything on Adam Gase. He's clearly out. But I've been impressed with the 55, not the 53, the 55 on the roster this year. At least the last few weeks, they've shown me something I didn't think they were capable of.
Me. That's what it's about. That doesn't mean that they're selfish. It means that they understand that a new coach is going to come in. And when a new coach comes in his first team meeting, he says all the right things to the players. We're all together and we're going to win. Everybody's going to have a chance. That's what he says. What he's thinking is this. You guys sitting before me in this team meeting got the last coach fired. If I get fired, it's not going to be because you did it again. I'm going to bring in other people. And so right now, what teams that are struggling, like the Jets, like the Jaguars, what they're thinking is, as individual players, what do I need to do to put on tape something that'll impress the next coach, that the next coach will think I can help him not get fired? And if that's not good enough in terms of a coach that comes in and wants to just clean house anyway, then the next team that I could go to, that coach will look at me on tape and say, that guy comes from a bad team, but he's not likely to get me fired because I like the way he's playing. And so you lose team cohesion. You lose everybody playing for their brother on either side of them, but you gain individuals trying to show what they can do. So that can be good. It can be bad. But that's what players are thinking when they're in this kind of a situation for the most part.
And it's no doubt, no matter what happens, they have locked up the 2nd overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft with a win over Cleveland yesterday. And the 2021 NFL draft will be held in Cleveland beginning on April 30th. It could be another reboot for the Jets.